All right, guys, I know that some of you are kind of old school card and dice players. Some of you are more new school computer type players. Regardless of which type you are, I do have a question for you, which is, do you like seeing the statistics, like the real life statistics as you play? Do you prefer to keep that a surprise? What is it that you like to see, right? So I'll show you what I'm talking about here. We'll go straight over here to the screen view. I'll make my face a little bit smaller here. No, I want to keep that part here. Let's see here. Don't hold down Alt. There we go. And we'll move this down a little bit. So when we look here at Bill Bailey's card, I was looking at this a second ago, and I was thinking, okay, have we covered everything that we need to cover in terms of being a pitcher and all the stuff that happens, all this funky stuff up here? I think we covered just about everything. We haven't talked much about speed ratings yet, but we can talk about that later. But the thing that was interesting to me, of course, here is the real-life statistics part of all this. And so the question is, what do you think? I mean, is it important for us to have this stuff on here? Or is that kind of like extra information that you don't really look at, you don't consult, right? I'll tell you this. When I played Skatersoft before these computer games came out, when I would play card and dice, I loved having this. But that's the only thing I would look at, right? I wouldn't spend time looking at the encyclopedia. I did have an old baseball encyclopedia once. I was playing the 1924 season. Could have looked it up. I didn't do that. Didn't spend time on Baseball Reference or doing anything like that. What I cared about was sort of what was on the card itself, because I wanted to play the game with the cards, right? In my opinion, mostly because I'm an old school APBA player, I always look at this stuff as being like a little bit too intrusive, right? I mean, it's probably a little bit more information than I want. Right. In theory, I should be able to look at his grade and look at sort of these ratings and have an idea of the sort of pitcher he is without needing to know like the ERA. Now, you know, and we've talked about this, that the Skatersoft grade is really not determined by the ERA in this NPIII format, right? This is rather a grade that's determined by the batted against average. There's a long history behind that. I won't bore you with that too much because it's not really germane to our story. And really, the numbers that are here are sort of like general numbers to give you an idea of what kind of player this was in real life, right? So you can see here that he had 22 games pitched, 12 of them were started. So we know that about half his games are started, half his games are in relief. Pretty normal for 1908. 106 innings pitched. Now, I don't know if how often Bailey is on the team. I don't know if he played like half the season or exactly what happened. If you could figure out the transaction dates, you could easily figure out, like, was he part of a pitching rotation? Was he kind of an on-again, off-again type starter? And that helps you a lot when you're doing a replay trying to figure out when to use him and how often to use him, right? That's what this stuff is intended to do. We'll go to the next guy, Bert Blue. You can see here for the position player, you have similar numbers, right? And we can look at this and see right away, okay, well, he played 17 games. Defensive games are 14, which means that he was on the field for 14 of the 17 games. That means he has a couple of pinch hit performances. This is a good thing to know, right? He's a catcher, probably going to be the backup catcher if he's playing that seldom, or maybe even the third string catcher, right? And then we want to look at this because this tells us in general what his offense is like. 319 on base percentage and 386 slugging percentage is not anything anybody's going to write home about today, but for 1908, that's actually pretty good, right? And you're looking at the rest of the bench, and you might think maybe we should have Blue on as a pinch hitter every now and then. Now, you don't have to do what they did in real life, right? You don't have to limit him to only 3 pinch hit performances or to only 17 times out there. I mean, if he's on your club, you could theoretically start him every day if you wanted to, and if you're going to be realistic about it, you got to rotate sometime. Right. But you know, it sort of depends on what your philosophy is and how you're looking at it. These statistics here, though, are really mostly designed to help you figure out how you're going to manage him, how often you're going to play him, and what it's going to look like, right? And I figure it's probably something similar with just about all of these games that have them. I know that some games will have like a bunch of stats on the card. Some games won't have so much. I'll be honest. I mean, I'm an old APBA player. I prefer to have no stats on the card because I like to just look at the guy and be able to tell as much as I can from the ratings, like if he was good or if he was bad. But, you know, we always get curious. We always want to know if this guy with the overpowered card, I mean, this is a pretty nice card for Bert Blue. We'd always like to know, like, how many games does this guy really play? And I will say that for the replayer, this sort of information really is helpful. Now, the other place where you want to look at statistics is while you're playing the game itself. So if we go over here to games played, you can see that NPIII gives us some stats, but not much. So I can see like the stat up to now for some categories, but there are other categories I can't see. And unfortunately, it's kind of hard for me to figure out exactly what Stone has been doing. It turns out that if you right click on this and say display last 10 games batting, it actually is going to display not only his last 10 games, but it will display all of his statistics here on the left side, which isn't that clear, but it does. Right, and you can see that, George Stone has played in 23 games, 101 plate appearances, which we also have over here. But you can also see here as 3 doubles, 1 triple. That tells you what the power breakdown is. And you can get an idea of how many times he struck out, how many times he's walked, his stolen bases and caught stealing, and so on and so forth. It's a very, I'd say, limited look at his statistics, right? There's not anything advanced here at all. It's mostly counting statistics, but it gives you an idea. And it will also tell you here how he's done as a pinch hitter, as opposed to playing as a starter. Another helpful tool if you're a replayer. Now, my big wish here, of course, what I would really like to see in NP3, I talk about this stuff all the time, I know, I'd really like to see like this screen be able to be full screen, and I'd like to see more information here, including perhaps some information about real life and like, how we did in the season as opposed to in the replay. But then again, that sort of depends upon how you want to play, and it depends upon what's most important to you, right? The real life numbers might be helpful, they might not. I know that with some games, I don't know if you can do this with OOTP. I know you can do it with Action PC Baseball. You can turn off the real life statistics. You can also turn off the ratings to make it so like, you just have to know if the guy is good or if the guy is bad. It's got positive and negative aspects as well. I'd recommend keeping the ratings on at least so you're not doing it completely blind. But the nice thing about turning off the real-life statistics is that you won't be as easily swayed by them, and so therefore you'll be able to, when you get in your replay, sort of play the replay the way that you really want to play it, right? Anyway, every game's a little bit different, and that's kind of my question for you, which is what do you prefer? Do you prefer to have the statistics in front of you? Do you like having it with no stats at all? I can tell you that I've played replays, in fact, that 1924 card and dice replay, I was using ball stat and ball score to do the input the games after I'd played them by hand, and I got behind, and after a while it was so much of a chore that I ended up giving up the project. Part of the problem is that I would play the project and I didn't know how anyone was doing. I didn't even know the standings, right? And that takes a lot away from you, right? So if you're doing it by hand, you need to have some sort of system where you can keep track of at least some basic things on a running basis so that you know what's happening. If you don't do that, or if you fall behind, it really, really is a burden to sit down for a couple hours and get caught up. And if you're way behind, like say 50 games behind, you just won't get caught back up. You just won't do it, right? So anyway, that's part of the question. I think that there's some sort of romanticism about trying to do this sort of project with no computers. I talked with my daughter just yesterday. She likes art, and she was telling me, Dad, I hate AI art. I just want to do everything by hand because it's more pure. That's more like the way it's supposed to be. I have a lot of, personally, I have a lot of sympathy for that view, but like, you got to be realistic. At some point in time, you're going to have to use AI, right? It's the wave of the future. If you want to make any money, if you want to do that with your art, you're going to have to do something. It's too convenient to ignore. That's also the way that I look at, statistics on the card and having different things open and using stuff like this to help you with your replay. At some point in time, as much fun as it is to think about just shutting out the outside world and we're just going to sit down and play this replay, at some point in time, you do kind of need to have that help. You can't just be a Kermageddon about it. Because if you start doing that, if you start, being like, well, I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way, I don't care about the modern world and stuff like that, you'll end up doing things the real long and slow and painstaking way. And then in the end, instead of having a great experience, you'll have a miserable experience because you're spending all of your time, finicking around with some stupid, stat compiler form or something that was, obsolete like 30 years ago, right? So anyway, there you go. That's my point of view on this. But I'd love to know how the rest of you feel. I know there are a lot of people who watch this, some my age, perhaps some younger, some who are older, perhaps some who are quite a bit more advanced in years. Just let me know what it is that you think and, what your approach is personally. I'll talk to you again later. Bye-bye.